Okay, looks like I've got some sound here, so we'll get started. Let me pop on here and see who's here with me today. Or I'm obvious I'm early. Okay, Kristen and Libby, glad to see you guys here. Okay, now as usual, I'm starting a little bit early, and we're going to finish off some of the reviewing that we needed to do. First of all, just the housekeeping kind of things. Here's what's due this week. The county, and this is all due on the 9th, which is of course on Friday, and the county, which is an example of data envelopment analysis. Then also the Foster case, which is a transportation case. It's due on the 9th, not the 39th, but the 9th. There is no such thing as 339, so my apologies about that. In fact, I think what I'll do right now is edit that so it looks right. And I'll edit it. Three, 9. And it's done. There, it's edited, and now it's all pretty and looks like it should. All right. Okay, now we'll go back to the modules. And as I mentioned, we had county. We're going to finish taking a look at data envelopment analysis. That will be due on Friday, the county case. And then on Friday also the pop down here, the Foster case, which is a transportation case, and then the Gorman case, which is also a transportation case. So we're looking at these problems, and this first one, county, uses data envelopment analysis. And I want to go back over here for just a moment and talk about it a little bit, okay? And here we are over here. The authors start us off over here on page 215 talking about data envelopment analysis, and they give us an example, a real-world example where it's used with a bank and using it to determine the branches that were operating efficiently. And the whole idea is to develop a composite using input and output measures, okay? In other words, things that would look like some constraints, and and that we could build into a mathematical model as a way to say, okay, here's the composite hospital based on the hospitals in our system. So data envelopment analysis is, we use that term to say we're looking at a system, okay, and we're going to collect data that envelop or that provide some kind of type of picture of the overall data. Now let me do something here for a minute, and I'm going to mute everybody. There we go. Now, thank you for those of you who also joined. So we have some input measures and output measures, and as I say in all of these cases, the key part of management is not just throwing the data into this tool and using it. The whole idea is that data development analysis follows what we call a methodology, an approach. And what that approach is, it says, is that the way that we evaluate a system's performance is to look at it as a whole, and the way that we look at the performance of a component of a system is to use the system as a standard, a composite of the system versus versus that particular location or operation. And so this is something that's used in systems, franchises, the systems of hospitals, say for example, like St. Anthony's. To some extent, data development analysis has also been used in the production of very complex products, where they'll take, let's say, for example, maybe the performance of a component of an automobile, and they'll use DEA to take a look at how well a particular component system works, say like the braking system in it, or the suspension. So it's a versatile tool. However, it's important to understand, okay, that it implies an assumption about what we call equifinality of inputs. And I talked about that Monday. And when we talk about that notion of the equifinality of inputs, what we're saying is that I can take the same input, okay, and get the same results every time. And it just doesn't work like that. Now, what we should be able to do, if the system, quote unquote, is what people would say is under control, is get results within a band, okay? Just like, test scores, just like, for example, IQ scores that are going to be clustered around -1, +1, or sigma, or +1 standard deviations, and -1 sigma or standard deviations, because roughly 68% of all observations should fall in there. So we have a band of tolerance, and so we build this composite. And while we might find that a component of the system is less or more efficient, because remember, we're talking about efficiency, okay, that we have to then go back and take a look and say, okay, well, where would it fit within everything else? So in the DEA, this case, we do one system component. Out in the real world, you do each system component, and you'd see which one appears to be out of range, appears to be an outlier, one that's either perhaps too efficient or not efficient enough. And there are ways you could be very efficient. For example, you could be really stringent with supplies, for example, because I believe that's one of the input. And while you may be cutting some costs, okay, you may be creating some problems down the road for yourself, or you may be setting yourself up for an issue that you don't want to have to deal with later on. If for example, if McDonald's says, well, we'll buy, a few batches of some really bad meat, and we'll just take the risk that, that it's not bad, it's kind of on the edge, okay? And we'll just take the chance that we can move it through the system really fast because we got a great price on it. Well, you're playing with fire, okay? And right now, something that's happening over in Japan and is Japan for years, especially other automotive makers, were known as the masters of quality control and quality assurance. Now what we're finding out is that, amazingly, although their products conform to are robust and good, the engineering people and some of those companies were lying about the data. Okay, it's let me tell you what this is like. Let's say, for example, you have a test and the best you can do is 100 points, and you make a 95. Pretty good. But because you have an ego or cultural thing or whatever, you believe you should have made a 97, so you find a way to fudge it and make it 97. 95 is way good enough, but you wanted the data. So this is the kind of thing they're embroiled in. They've already had one automobile executive step down, and they're probably going to see some more of that happen as they find that those safety data or product quality data have been compromised. Now, I realize I'm being a little more didactic than you may want, but this data envelopment analysis process, as I said, it's a methodology. It assumes that there's a range of tolerance or a range of performance that we're at that looks good. And I was thinking about this last night when they were talking about the young lady, I forget her name, who's a skier, and she's 33 years old, and she went over in South Korea, and she won a bronze medal. And so there was some disappointment that she only won the bronze medal. Well, at this point, she's only the third best skier in the world. So when you put it in perspective, you go, wow, okay? And it would be the same thing with things like the Academy Awards, okay? You watch those and you go, and just to get awarded is really fantastic. But I'll tell you what really is fantastic is if you're a bankable star. And so there were people who got nominated on the strength of their performance, but they're not bankable stars. You've got other people that are bankable stars. When they're in the movie, people come to see it. And essentially, at the end of the day, the movie business, like the music business, is both an art form and a business. And it needs people, it's got to produce dollars to function. And, at the same time, it wants to have artistic credibility. Well, all that being said, the DEA, that county case, and they walk us through all that. There's a nice little thing from the Smithsonian. That's wonderful. I didn't know today's National Cereal Day, but if it is, fantastic. And let everyone know I'm a serial killer. I like Wheaties. All right, so we've got the and the authors give us a nice look at the overview of the approach. Okay, and again they talk about the hypothetical composite, and so we give us some of these annual resources that are consumed. Okay, and so on the this case is a little unique. Okay, because it just focuses on efficiency. All right. There are also composite models out there that focus on effectiveness, which one might say profitability, or one might say revenue generation. We've had a revenue and Leisure's a revenue management case, and we've talked about that. And so they begin to walk us through the weighting of these for linear programming. Now, the weights are just we use weighting as a technique to attach importance to particular components as we build this mathematical model, and those weights are there, okay? And then we see the annual services, the output, and so we have this, and these all have to equal 1, okay? Now the weights, when we weight data that we put into a constraint or a linear programming model of some kind, it can be importance, okay, or it can be probabilistic in nature. And so I could say, okay, well here's a portfolio, all right, of assets. Let's say a portfolio, and I've got stocks, I've got long-term treasury notes, this or that, and I've got an expect, and I have a return, okay, and then I attach a weight to them in terms of probability. In other words, how likely do I think it is that they're going to perform at that level? And so I have a weighted expected return. Okay, well, we've got weights here, and we apply that to each of those, and we have those sub notes ready to go. All right, and so then we're going to see, okay, the output measures, and they are the patient days. That composite is the sum of them. Now this is a very, very nice figure, a schematic that shows you all of the output measures, okay, and then the composite, okay, and you'll notice that it takes, okay, from each of these, okay, the Medicare, the non-Medicare, the nurses, and the interns. And what you're looking at is here is patients and caregivers, okay? And so what we're saying is that the output for the composite hospital, and this is just, again, I talk about system equifinality, is equal to or greater than the county hospital, okay? And that's, and they give us the general form of that of the output constraint. All right, so let's move on over and we'll take a look at it again as we begin to walk through this. And we see the inputs, and the authors walk us through each of these. Okay, this is very important, and you'll want to take a look at that. The logic, i.e., the methodology of this method, specific method. This is what it's all about. Okay, and that's what we talk about: the same or more output while requiring less input. The so-called notion of the equifinality of inputs. All right, and then we see the composites for the input measures, and then we begin to see our mathematical model, and we're going to minimize the efficiency subject to these constraints. Okay, and basically, then we're going to just throw this into the solver, and away we go. Now they give us the solution for the county hospital data. This is from that lingo tool that the authors have. It's going to look different in Excel, but what you're going to start to look at is, number one, is it efficient or not? Okay. How efficient is the county hospital versus the composite hospital? And where might there be slack or surplus? And we may or may not be able to reorganize some of that. But usually not, because we're at disparate locations. Okay? And that'll be pretty much, that moves us into that revenue management case. Now I want to take a moment here and I want to take a look at a couple of the other cases, and then we'll look at the files for them, 256 through 262. Okay, I want to find that page number. Okay, deals with Foster, and that's the Foster generator. So let me pop over here real fast. Close your eyes. It's going to be fast. I should just do the search. I apologize about this. Or bookmark this stuff. Probably better off. And I think I'll just put in Foster generators. Foster generators moves us into a different type of problem. Okay? And this is what we call transportation problems, the movement of things or people, or things and people across space. Okay, and here we start to get some data about them, and we see the origin and the plant, and then the production, the 3-month production capacity, what they can make. Okay, and then we also see the distribution center and the forecast. So they're sending stuff out to a forecast. Now I want to mention something here that the authors don't talk about, and I'm not sure you get this and not everybody takes a production course. It's important to understand that when we talk about the capacity of a facility, okay, there's the theoretical capacity and there's the operational or the real capacity. And never do the two meet. and the design and the extent to which an operation is working like it should, it's going to be close to ideal, but always will not be. Okay, it's rare that it will perform to that level. Okay, so that's an important thing. So when we talk about these capacities and you figures, we need to be looking at them and saying, okay, these just didn't get pulled from a tree. There was some work that went into this. The forecast is the part that's even trickier. Okay, you have control over this. These are controllable variables. You remember we started back at the front end of the course and we talked about controllable versus uncontrollable variables. These are uncontrollable. We can tweak them, we can advertise, we can offer specials, but in the end, they are responsive. Demand is responsive to market forces. Okay, we'll pop on over here. This shows you a beautiful schematic diagram of what they're looking at, showing you the plants. And they use some terms here: nodes and arcs. This is a node. An arc is this line, that goes from one. So we see the Cleveland plant supplies Boston, it supplies Chicago, and it looks like to me that Cleveland also supports Lexington. So we've got these origin nodes, these plants, okay, and then we've got distribution centers. Now, one of the things I did it's been about 3 years ago, I did a network study with a couple of colleagues of mine. And what we did is we took a topic that's researched in the journals. The topic was gamification. And we looked at major journals to find the network, okay, who's quoting, because when people write paper, if you go and look at a journal article, you'll see their references. And so the question is, who's quoting who's using what study and their references. And then we built a network model so we could identify the main players in that, and those who tend to be people who were quoted a lot. And so we were able to build that network, that neural network of scholars in terms of that topic. And it was a very interesting thing to see. So the network analysis or transportation analysis is a very useful tool. Well, that being said, again, they show us the destination, all right, and the number of units shipped, and we have the supplies. And now we'll pop over here to the full Monty, and this is the problem, and we're trying to minimize distance, which implies cost, transportation costs, yet while meeting demand. Okay, and this is what we would call a two-tiered level. Let me back up for just a moment. Okay, two-tiered meaning actually this is a three-tiered model. No, it's two, excuse me. We've got the plants and the distribution centers, I'm sorry. But if you had assembly operations in between the two of these, okay, then it's a trinode. This is a binodal environment. Okay, and here's the mathematical model. See, again, the thing that makes management science to me so infinitely fascinating, and I think such a powerful tool, is that I can sit down and I can build, okay, I can build a model before I've ever done anything. And I can get those transportation costs, and I guarantee you that folks that are in the logistics business, the delivery business, they do incredible things. My wife worked for FedEx for about 15 years, And so one of the opportunities I took was to go down and visit, well, several times, to go down and visit the super hub. And it's just unbelievable. And each time I went in there, it was even bigger and more complex than ever. And it was just an incredible thing. And there were I wanted to go. I wanted to see it at Christmas time. They wouldn't let me in because they were just too busy to deal with the visitor. And you can imagine, Phoenix busy. It's a busy season. There are some things on YouTube that show you, but it's just unbelievable. And you talk about mastering a transportation problems. They have transportation levels or nodes built upon nodes and arcs built upon arcs. So it's just this fantastical thing. And you know, if you think about air flight, we've all become so accustomed to it. But at any given time, if I'm not mistaken, there's I believe about 12,000 flights, 12,000 in the air at any given time around the world. Amazing. So these models give us great power. They give us the power to envision something and to see how it begin to work. And you probably hear a lot about driverless vehicles. And right now, what's being pushed are driverless trucks and driverless semis or semi-autonomous. They'll probably, for insurance purposes, have a human being. Okay, but the vehicle will drive. And why? Well, when you do that, then you begin to be able to control fuel costs, etc. The human beings are human beings, and they're variable. And no matter how good a driver is, you're going to make a mistake or this, that. And you can program the vehicle. And the intention of these people is to, of the transportation folks and logistics, is to get to the point where the human being, okay, is either there as kind of a monitor of the machines, which is what happens now in automated assembly operations, or to be the person who makes the last mile. Every one of these distribution companies, cable companies, delivery companies have the problem of what we call the last mile. There's a huge internet trunk line that runs right through the central Oklahoma. OBU feeds it has a feed into it, as does all of the everybody in Oklahoma City, and that's great. But then the last mile problem begins when you say, well, each resident some people want to use Cox, some want to use AT&T, some want to use Verizon, and that's got to be all worked through. And that means you got to get to that customer, okay? And that's why they call it the last mile problem. It's the same thing in delivery, and human beings will probably be the ones who handle that last mile to deal with some of the variabilities that get incurred with that. Well, all that being said, we'll flip on. We'll head on, and here we have the supply and the build of the various constraints, and then we see the optimal solution for Foster, and the file is over there, okay? But we can see the route, the unit shipped, the cost per unit, and our total cost, okay? And if we had to assume some changes, this would change our efficiency level, or change where we look. And here, of course, is the optimal solution. Once we've run it through the Waring blender, or we've ran through the machine. I call it the Waring blender, because solver just takes all kinds of data and chops it up, makes it pretty, and gives us some answer. So that's pretty much it as far as Foster generators. Okay. Now we have one other case, and that's the Gorman case. And so I want to go over and find Gorman. And Gorman is pages 276 to 278. Hey, I've learned to do a search. I teach data admin. I've learned to do a search in a textbook. I'm getting smarter every day. All right, here we are, and we have a road network. Now, this is a little bit different. This is more like what we would deal with what we call, where we might use PERT CPM, which is Program Evaluation Review Technique, critical path method. The idea of the critical path method is we try to identify the pathway or the set of arcs between nodes that is the longest or the most expensive, so that if we can bypass it, or if we can not bypass it, but if we have other approaches where we can use slack resources, we do that. Okay, and so they show us the distances for this company, in road distance. Okay, now again, this is a very, very simplistic model. The distance means nothing. Okay, 3 miles in Manhattan is not 3 miles in Oklahoma City, is not 3 miles in Los Angeles, and is not 3 miles in Chicago, and is not 3 miles in Paris. Okay, so when you talk about road distances, that has to be looked at with a grain of salt. And in fact, as I mentioned, the company Esri, ESRI, they're out in California. They do a lot of work for companies, helping them analyze and build real-time transportation network systems, so that if there's a wreck, or there's or there's construction, or cars are backed up, they can get an alternate route. Okay, and you see some of this, when you're driving on the interstate. It says, to I-44 8 minutes, or you'll see something that says, there's a wreck ahead. If you have my vehicles, both of them, it drives me nuts. I have to turn it off, because every time there's a wreck anywhere, it'll say, caution, wreck it, so and so and so and so. I'm going, thank you for letting me know. I'm not going to head through there, or I have enough sense if I see the car's backed up to get off. That's just the machine trying to tell me, hey, here's what you need to do. But this is a little bit different problem than we had before. When we had we had those nodes that were origin points, and then we had the distribution centers. That's fairly straightforward. This becomes a little more complex, because we have here a true network where theoretically everything is connected to everything. And so if we look, for example, if we look at the nodes 1, 2, and 6, we're looking at a distance of 39. My alternative route is to go 1, 3, 5, and 7. And if I do that, that's 26. That's 20. That's 33. So right now, if I want to go from node 1 to 6, I'm going to take this southern path, if you will, as opposed to the northern path. Now, so well, are there any other paths? Sure. Now, I'm not trying to be didactic, but this just shows us at the bottom line how this would work. Well, I go here, this is 25, that's 28. I'm at 34, I'm at 41, don't want to do that. This is 25, that's 30, that's 34, that's 41, don't want to do that. So my choices are 1, 2, 6 or 1, 3, 5, 6. Okay, and so you can see they show us these distances in each of them. And so we have to we want to minimize that distance, i.e. the shortest route problem. Okay, and so this is also known as a transshipment problem. And you say, why is it called that? Because I have interactions incoming and outgoing from the nodes. The only node, there are only 2 what we would call simple nodes. And that would be the origin node and the destination node. Everything's coming out of it. Everything's coming into node 6, and you see these interactions between these middle nodes. This is pretty standard type of transshipment problem. And then they walk us through the linear programming for that. We're going to minimize, and then using the general linear programming mode, again reminding us of that. Okay, now let's go in for just a moment, and we'll go into the course, and let's go into the files for just a moment. We'll take a look at these. So let's pop into files, and I thank you for those of you who are here today. And I do want to say this, and I'm hoping that others who see this will spread the word, or will hear what I'm saying. The system tracks everybody in my courses. I know what folks have looked at. I know how long they spent looking at it. I know what they've done, how many times they visited. I have all that data. So participation data are tracked here. So when I have folks who are struggling and they're not looking they're not spending any time looking at the recordings, basically they skip the lecture, and then they're surprised if they don't do well. So all I can say is this is not just throwaway time. This is valuable, because as we come to the end of the course, I'm going to ask you to apply some of these skills. And see, I'm operating on a crazy assumption. You're adults, you're paying for this, and you know what you got to do. Okay, and so I don't know, it's a crazy way to run a class. That's how I do it. So if people skip or they don't look, they will be the ones when we come down to the end and you have to apply some of this, they're going to be in hot water. Let's start. First of all, let's look at county. Okay, and we're going to come down to the MS-13 web files. Here they are, and we're going to download those. And hopefully in my lifetime. There we go. And I believe we're over on chapter 6. Okay, we got Foster and Gorman right there, so we'll take a look at those. And we also want to look at county. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to diminish this down. I'm going to take Foster and throw it on my desktop. And I'm going to take Gorman and throw it on my desktop. Okay. And I'm going to go back to the files, and I'm going to go to, and DEA, I believe, is the county is in chapter, yeah, right. It's in chapter 5. Okay. So I've got these 3 files, and of course there's my friend Cardinal Buddy, and framed within the beautiful, beautiful mountain range up there in Wyoming and Jackson Hole. My brain just went dead. It's the Grand Tetons. Okay, let's look at county for a minute. And now I may, if I'm not mistaken, ask you to do some manipulation of the variables in some of these other files. But just here's the county hospital, okay, and here's our efficiency. And I'm going to click on data, and we'll come over to the solver and take a look. All right, and there's our objective with minimize the efficiency and the changing cells B21 to F21. You can see those. Okay. And those are the optimal solutions weighted for the efficiency. And then we're also looking then at the constraints. Okay. Nothing terribly unusual. Just my usual caveat of make sure that the constraints that you have are the key constraints that you should be looking at. Okay? Now, even that, and again, this is an introduction to management science, and analyzing key variables in system performance, especially in complex systems like these hospitals are, or a chain of hospitals or a chain of fast food, that is a whole course in itself. Okay? Because what we think might be composite is an important factor, may not be. Now, in this case, in most places, there is what we call a naive assumption saying this is what's important to us. This is what we think are, and that's a reflection of corporate values or corporate strategy. Okay. All right. So, yeah, one of the things I've noticed about my cable vendor, and I haven't cut the cord, I admit it, is that they will, if something goes wrong, they give me something. Okay. And I like that. I like it better. People in this, and they're operating a continuous system. Internet's up. They don't tell me, okay, the TV, you can go turn the TV on and go look at on demand between 11 and 12 today. It's on all the time. Okay, and we've gotten to where we want internet just like turn on the lights or turn on water. Okay, you guys aren't even old enough to remember the days when we thought it was miraculous we could get internet for a few hours a day. That's true. Well, nonetheless, here's our model. We're using the simplex LP. Okay, and you can always go down and play with some of these and see what it looks like. Okay, so that shows you what it looks like in the model. Again, though, this is easy. Building the model, putting that together. The hard part's this stuff. What are the variables that we need to be working with? How do we weight them? What are the key input and output measures? That's what you get paid for, is to be smart enough to figure those out. And then you really get paid for is to say, okay, how do we take that and analyze it? Well, I'm going to close this off, okay, and then we'll close this file. And I'm not going to save any changes. And I want to take a look now at Foster. And as I said before, last week, we're going to see a tour de force where we're going to see this tool used. We looked at I think, built a portfolio. We did an advertising buy. This week's kind of like that because we look at composite analysis, data development, of how we can look at a whole system of operations. And here we're looking at transportation problems. Now, I'm going to say this every single class, so just tune me out if you're tired of hearing it. If you're an accounting major, good for you. You probably have a job or you're headed to one. Computer science students, unfortunately, don't take this class, although I think they find it very enjoyable. Most of them have a job or waiting on them. If you're in the other majors and you're getting down to crunch time, let me suggest one of two things. And I can tell you, I make these recommendations on the basis of your prior colleagues, folks who've come through before you, in what I recommended. Logistics is an incredibly rich place of opportunity if you want to go in and get into a growth business. Why? Well, it's simple. It's called the internet. And I don't care how much stuff Amazon sells, they've got to get it to you. And the second is called a global economy. Okay? And to get stuff made in China over to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, so it's there in the Apple store over at Penn Square Mall, hey, we're so used to it, we're so blasé, and it's a miracle. So there are great opportunities for you out in logistics, and I would really encourage you to do that. If that ain't your cup of tea, and then let me recommend one other thing, and that would be to get some corporate branding. And the people who hire more college graduates than anybody enterprise rental system. I have several former students who work for enterprise and were not real happy, but now they're loving it because they've moved up the ladder and they're doing very well. Enterprise, you know, is retail, it's hard hours, it's dealing with business people, typically, or people on a trip. But you have that corporate branding in your resume, and I guarantee you, you're going to go places. And I'll give you also my wife as an example of that. My wife has a degree in art from Southwest Baptist University, okay? And she took a couple of administrative courses in administration, okay? Because like her mom, she wants to be a church lady. So my wife's mother was my wife's mother was an executive assistant out in industry for about 20 years. And then for about another 20 years, she was a short for pastor, okay? And my wife has done administrative. When we were out in Arizona, she had people calling her all the time because she worked for FedEx. When we came out here, the minute that the folks at our church found out she'd worked at FedEx, they wanted her to come on board as an administrative assistant. She had the corporate branding. They knew she was going to be a quality employee. So I encourage you to do that, okay? If things don't work out, that's a great place to go. So that's some career advice, okay? And I know I'm just an old guy and I'm a little didactic and probably bugging you saying it. You probably get all kinds of advice from people, but I can tell you based on my personal experience, that's what I know, okay? And, all I can tell you is if you're willing to travel anywhere, the sky is the limit. And I'll use a person who doesn't even have a college degree, my little brother, who went to work for Hilton Hotels in Tucson, Arizona as a security guy. He worked his way up. He became the entourage lead, which was when people from Hollywood or would come into the resort there in Tucson to rest up, okay, he was the guy who interfaced with their security, etc. Okay, and I can tell you, he's got a book of autographs, unbelievable. But the thing that was so cool was he had done so well there that the people at Hilton called him and said, "Would you like to go and work at our store, their facility there in Honolulu, near Diamond Head?" Well, he did. He had a problem. He had a disease. It was called. He was in love, and his wife, who's a wonderful person, her parents didn't want them moving away, so he lost a chance to live in Hawaii. They offered him a job overseas if he would learn French. They'd put him in one of their operations on the Riviera. The Riviera. I rest my case. All right, I know. Okay, now we got foster generators here. We've got the supply, the origins. They show us the minimum cost, and you can take a look at this. And you can also look at the Gorman transportation problem. Okay, the main thing again is making certain that we've got the right data. Okay, and that we've agreed upon them, and then we'll let the machine do its math. Now, let me say this. While this mathematically and logically we would assume makes sense, it may be a situation where politically and the side of a corporation, it makes no sense whatsoever. When I went to Webster University, and I got a master's in business there, a master of arts in business, because you could choose tracks. So I chose two tracks. I chose a track in operations management. I chose a track in finance. And in the operations track, we had a course on location, facility location. And we went through all of these models and all this work. It was rough. And I remember at the end of the class, I was so yeah, I was pretty mentally exhausted. I was working full time and going to school at night. With them, Webster operates courses for adults. And at the end of the course, and this is a guy who wrote the book on location analysis. And he said, he said, at the end of the day, when we do all these work, always remember that when we talk about, especially like company headquarters, the decision may be where we'll put the company headquarters in a location where it's closest to the CEO's family. Okay, particularly if it's a privately company, or where people think they'll be able to interface with enough politicians, or close to suppliers, which may not mathematically or logically make sense, but from that company's thought process strategically. Okay, and so these are great tools. And they're great ways for us to talk and to communicate, and a way to be disciplined in our approach to dealing with a systems analysis that we might need to do, or a transportation problem. Well, I want to say thank you to the 3 or 4 of you, in fact, 4 of you, who stayed here and listened to me. But you probably put it on mute, and you can scroll forward and back, etc. But that's pretty much it now. And I would encourage you to go and take a look at the sensitivity report. Okay, and we've talked about how to interpret those and what they're trying to tell us. And this is Foster. And then also you'll want to take a look at Gorman. I'm going to click that on for just a second so you can see it. And it's again another type of transportation problem. And transportation problems, these also, I can't remember if this textbook has one. These are transshipment problems, but those types of problems are also what we might encounter in a production facility or a manufacturing facility. Hey, I'll tell you something. Yesterday, I was out to, I work over here 2 days a week. I work in Shawnee 2 days a week because I have some churches here I do some work with. Okay, and so I need to be over here. That's why I do the virtual days on that business. To make a long story short, I stopped at a place and I had a delightful lunch, and it dawned on me, this is nothing more than a manufacturing facility. They're just making food instead of cars or whatever. Well, we've done close to 50, maybe 60 minutes here. And I do appreciate your time, and I'll be looking forward to seeing your work. And I want to make sure that we're all clear on what's going on. So let me pop over here one more time into the modules area. And so you know what's going on, what's due. Okay, the syllabus will be even better. So let's go there for just a second. And we'll see what all is due. Okay, and let's go down here. March 9th, Chapter 7 exam, and then County, Foster, and Gorman are due by 5 p.m. on Friday the 9th. Folks, have a great Friday and have a great weekend. Thank you for being here, and I appreciate it. And I'll see all of you next Monday. Take care. I'm in. Stop the share and end the meeting.